Hey, thanks again. I'm glad to see we have so many people to come out this morning, which means that the panel has some friends, and there's probably some people here who missed class and need extra credits. I'm sure. I've been there before. What I'm talking to you today is about a guide that would address disproportionality and disparity in the Texas Department of Family and Protective Services. Most people know it as CPS, or Child Protective Services. And it's addressing the disproportionality. And for the purposes of this paper, I'm focusing on African Americans, because the disproportionality was so great within the African American children within the foster care system. But while I talk about the paper, I'm also going to be talking about a typical family's journey through CPS, or the parent, what the parent would actually face going through CPS experience, you could say. And so with the disproportionality, I'm talking about the representation of a certain culture or group of individuals within the population, and then the representation of that culture within an organization. And so in 2000, in CPS, we've always had foster children, but let's say in 2000, African American kids in the state of Texas, let's say that was about 12%. About 12% of the children were African American. However, of all the foster care children, which was fluctuating anywhere between 26 and 28,000, of those children, 45% were African American. And so you had a 15% of the population. However, of the foster care, you had 50, almost basically half of all these children that were here. And so the department noticed this as well. The department actually noticed that this was an issue. So as early as 2000, they formed a disproportionality area to just look at disproportionality within the department. And so they kind of just started talking about it. It wasn't too much going on, but they just started talking about what could be done. And so about 2004, programs started being implemented within the department. And so we had one of the things that were presented was it's called Knowing Who You Are. Knowing Who You Are is a 2-day training that the caseworkers attend, that talks about different cultures. It also talks about institutional racism, and it gives the person an opportunity to talk about what culture they are, what culture they represent within a safe environment. And so that was one of the things that were implemented for the department. Additionally, there was another training, which I want to say was about 4 days, called Undoing Racism. Undoing Racism was similar to the Knowing Who You Are, but it actually added more institutional racism and how institutional racism from 1960 or 70 could affect a family today. And that was also implemented as well. And we had also each year you had the online trainings that covered civil rights training, different aspects of multicultural training as well. And so those things were implemented in 2004. And in 2010, they kind of followed up and said, hey, how are we doing as a department? While the gap, the disproportionality gap had decreased, it was still right around 20%, 25%. So if you think from 45 to 25, that's a big difference. But if you think from 12% to 25%, the population, you're still looking at twice as many kids are represented within the department, within the foster care system. So now these programs continue to be implemented. They're more wide. There are more disproportionality specialists within the department, just to continue this process, and it does continue to be improved. As I looked at it, one of the things that I looked at was From 2000 to 2010, well, I would say that attitudes changed as well. So maybe this disproportionality decreased, but also it's hard to say whether the disproportionality decreased because of changing attitudes in the United States, or it's because of these programs that were implemented. And so, because there wasn't a control group at this time, and I think a control group probably would be a little unethical, because you wouldn't withhold the training from some workers and give it to others just to see what happens. I see my experimental professor back there, and so I want to bring that part out. And so what I would want to do, and what this paper is about, actually employing a disproportionality specialist to go through that journey with the family. And this is in addition to the caseworker. So let me give you kind of a flow chart of how it would work. Let's say there is an allegation of abuse and neglect of a child. There's an 800 number you call. It goes to Austin. Based on the locating information of the child, the case gets assigned to the closest CPS. That's basically what happens. And so the investigator that's on call goes out and meets with that family. If the family has had no experience with Child Protective Services, they may think back to what they know. You know, their global knowledge about Child Protective Services, which these people show up, they take their kids, and that's it. You know, and that's one of the reasons that Child Protective Services is now Department of Family and Protective Services, because CPS has such a negative connotation. So when I started in 2005, that name was changing because of that reason. And so this family, let's say it's an African American family, because that's what I'm talking about. This family meets the caseworker, and that caseworker could be any ethnicity. They meet this caseworker, they don't know what to expect. Only thing they know is they're being accused of something. That's the only thing they know. And so this person may be avoided. They may avoid the caseworker. They may be hostile toward the caseworker because these accusations, and they're scared. And so there may be a tendency for the family member not to communicate with the caseworker. And so also the caseworker is not immune to this environment. That caseworker is also going to be maybe a bit nervous. Maybe they may feel some of that hostility, or they may, based on the accusation, they may feel like, you know, this person did this, they did this to a child, so this person is automatically a bad person. And so all these things can happen. And I bring it to that point because the department has all of these policies in place that are designed to assist the family and designed to decrease this disproportionality and have equal treatment among families. But really, it comes down to the caseworker. The caseworker, in essence, is that gatekeeper, because all of the information that the family receives really comes from that one individual. There is information that is handed out to a family that talks about CPS, but I don't know if they read it. I don't know at that time, you know, how they handle that. Most of the time, it's thrown away, at least in my experience. But so the information that's available comes strictly from that caseworker. And so in my guide, or this guide that I would put together, is we would have what's called a disproportionality specialist that would also meet with his family. And the disproportionality specialist wouldn't be the person who is talking about child safety. This would be the person who's talking about how are you doing as a person? How are you doing as a parent? What are your questions as a parent? And at the same time, this person, the family member may not identify this person differently, because when a person from the state shows up, they just see them as CPS. So whether it be a caseworker, an investigator, a human services tech, they're all kind of seen in the same light. The disproportionality specialist would meet with the family initially. Okay, now let's say we're gonna move forward a little bit. Let's say that the person, there is some concern about an abuse and neglect, and the investigator, or the supervisor, the program director feels like this child has been abused and neglected, and they are at risk of future abuse and neglect. So at this point, the caseworker or the investigator writes an affidavit, goes to the judge and say, it's in the best interest of this child to be in the protective care of Child Protective Services. Okay, so we get the court order, now the department has custody of this child. So look what just happened. This one person came in and said, hey, look, I'm just here to talk to you. I just want to know what happened. And then later on that day, they're driving away with your child. Now just kind of let that sink in for a minute, anyone who has children. And now, you don't see your child for at least a week. At least a week. And then when you do see him, you see him in the CPS office for an hour. Okay. And then within 14 days, you get to go before a judge and kind of plead your case. Okay, so nothing happens. So for 2 weeks, you're just lost. Your kids are gone. All these things have happened. So the investigator, at this point, they're probably not going to talk to you too much more. They have the child. The child is basically what we call conditionally safe. So they're not going to have a lot of conversation with you from this point. Now, in my model, the disproportionality specialist would tell you what's going on. They would tell you what's going on, what just happened. Because at this point, when the child is removed, what we call removal, you're given a paper that says, hey, if there's anyone who can take care of your child, please give us all of their locating information, and if they have any criminal history that would prohibit them from being a good caregiver. So imagine this, your child is in the back of this stranger's car and they're just about to drive away, and I just handed you a little stack of paper and say, could you fill this out for me? So, needless to say that, that is funny. I meant for it to be. Needless to say that doesn't go over well. I mean, it just doesn't go over well. So you basically your child for the first week in the CPS office, and then you have a court hearing. So you go before the judge. You have the CPS attorney. It's kind of like it's kind of at a table, and the judge is on that side, and you have whoever wants to attend. CPS attorney, CPS worker, maybe a CASA worker, another attorney, and then you. And then the CPS gets to go first. They get to tell why this child's in care, why this child needs to stay in care, all of these things that are going to happen. And now the judge, it can go either way. I can't tell you it can go either way. However, most of the time, the judge says, you know what, this child's going to remain in care. We'll come back in 6 weeks to see how you're doing. And so at that time, the investigation is officially over, and you get another caseworker. You get a different caseworker. So you've never seen this caseworker before, and this person comes up to you and says, hey, I'm the new caseworker. And as a parent, what do you want to know? When am I going to get my child back? That's it. That's all you want to know, because prior to this, you just found out that your child is not coming home. You found out he's not coming home, and you don't know when. You have no idea. And so you finish, you walk out, just despondent, and then you have another caseworker that says, hey, I'm your new caseworker, and, I'm going to be working with you. And so as a parent, you say, I just want to know one thing, when am I going to get my child back? And the traditional response is, well, that depends on you. Wait a minute, that depends on me? Well, this person came, took my child, I had no control over it, we came to court, I had no control over when we came to court, I didn't have an attorney, and this judge just said, you are not going to get your child back today. And this person just told me, well, however, when it comes to getting my child back, it depends on me. How does it depend on me when nothing has depended on me up until this point? And so, you have a new caseworker. However, in my model, you will still have this disproportionality specialist who will tell you, A, what just happened. And this person has been in contact with you since the beginning of the investigation, which could have been about a month already. So this is someone that you are vaguely familiar with. They basically give you information, and it wasn't the person who took your child away. And so if you have to deal with two people, you say, you know what, this person is probably the lesser of two evils, and I'm going to feel a little bit more comfortable with them. So you might be a little bit more likely to communicate with this individual and at least hear what they have to say. And so the disproportionality specialist wouldn't be your attorney or anything. They would just tell you what's going on. They would tell you the language, what's an adversary hearing, what is a status hearing. You know, all of these different aspects that come along with the Department of Family and Protective Services. And so, as you get what's called services, now typically you're going to have to do some kind of parenting classes, maybe some anger management, maybe some individual counseling, maybe even a psychological evaluation. So, all of these things, this caseworker in about 2 weeks hands you and says, this is your family plan. And your family plan gives you a list of everything that you're going to have to do, where it's going to be done, and in 6 weeks you're going to go back to court and report to the judge and see what the judge thinks if you're going to get your child back. Now, many of the families that we work with are in poverty. And so, anybody rode the bus lately? Imagine you have a psychological evaluation you need to do. You need to visit your child. You need to do anger management. And you have court. And you may even have a job. And so all of these things are brought upon this parent or parents at the same time. And so if the parent is unable to do this, well, oftentimes the caseworker says they're not cooperative. They are, they're just not cooperating with their services. They're not doing what they're supposed to do. And remember, the investigator was first. You have one caseworker. Now you have another one what's called a conservatorship worker. Well, the information that is received by the conservatorship worker comes directly from the investigator. So the way that the investigator documents is going to really affect how the conservatorship worker sees that parent. So if you're going through, and this parent is deceptive, is a word like deceptive, if they're hostile, it's a hostile environment, they're hostile toward the caseworker, well, you may already start thinking, well, this person is, this person's difficult. This person's difficult to work with. And so, as the caseworker, you may be less likely to give them additional opportunities because they've already been identified as hostile. They've already been identified as not wanting to work with you. So, what the disproportionality specialist would do is continue to work with this parent or continue to communicate with this parent and tell them about the entire process because they don't know. And remember, you as a caseworker, you're the only person without the disproportionality specialist. The caseworker is the only person that they can really get information from besides their friends who have had a CPS experience. And so now, during this process, the department also offers lesser known services, that I should say. One is called concrete services. Concrete services assist with rent. It assists with electric bills. It assists with beds for the children. Anything that could help that child be safe or could help the parents be better off, those are services that are offered through the department. In Nueces County, and that's concrete services all in Texas, but in Nueces County we have what's called FAST Foundation, who is a nonprofit group that people volunteer, people donate to, that also help the families in whatever they need, books, anything they need. We also offer bus passes, and the caseworker will also give the client a ride. We do all of that. However, if I know that a client maybe needs their rent paid, but they just said some very derogatory things to me just before when I visit them, maybe I'm not as likely to say, hey, you know what, I know you need your rent paid, I'm going to help you. Maybe not. And really, that's the reality of it, because the caseworker is not immune to the way that clients treat them, and vice versa. And so there may be a time when, due to fear, fatigue, the amount of the caseload, then the caseworker may say, you know what, I'm not going to do that request, because it is a request and it takes time. And so that service is not available to that family because it comes straight to the caseworker. And one of the words in the title we talked about was disparity. And disparity comes when you got one group that's not receiving the same amount of services. And not even saying it's an ethnic or racial thing, but just one group or one individual doesn't have access to these services for whatever reason. And it could be because those items are not measured on your employee evaluation. Like when a caseworker has an employee evaluation, you're looking at how often you see the family, when your family plan's done, how long the case is open. It doesn't measure how many bus passes you give the family. It doesn't measure how many bus tokens you give them, how many times you talk to them on the phone, how much money you spend on doing concrete services. So these things are not evaluated. So as a caseworker, you may feel that, well, let me take care of the things that's going to secure my job rather than take care of the items that's going to really assist this family. And so the disproportionality specialist, again, would not have those same restraints and would actually be there to inform this family what services are actually available across the board. So following that same family, if you go through, eventually you work the services, the child comes back home. Well, when the child comes back home, they've been out of the home for maybe a couple of months. And child goes home, child, let's say he's safe, parents have completed services, we're done. So that caseworker is typically done. Even if the case is not closed, the caseworker is done with the family because services are done, child back home. However, the disproportionality specialist will be there to help reintegrate that child back in the family because that child or children have been away from that home for months. And then all of a sudden they come back in and there is some family dynamics that are kind of off now because that child's been away for so long. And so the disproportionality specialist will be there to make sure that they have services available, such as family counseling, such as those services such as formal daycare that gives the family daycare for 6 additional months after the case is closed to help with that family stabilization. So the disproportionality will be there, right up until the very end, and we'll even follow up within 3 to 6 months to see how that family is doing. So that's what would happen. Is that time?
No, it worked out.
It did.